Evening, good evening. One of the most important things that we are working on right now is protecting our democracy. And so there were quite a few things that happened today, but that's what I'm going to focus on this evening. I had the opportunity to speak out on MSNBC this evening. And so after this, if you stay tuned, there'll be some clips from that interview. And then also I've attached with it the speech that I gave from the House floor, really calling upon those leaders that say that they want to be, this or that for all Virginians, to make sure that they're living up to those words. So I appreciate you for tuning in. I will, of course, continue to update us on what's happening on other legislation, but voting rights are so fundamental and foundational to everything else that is what we're going to be talking about this evening.
In Virginia, which has been a purple, blue trending state for the last couple of years, you have Glenn Youngkin get into office claiming that he's the nice basketball playing suburban kind of clickbait on Netflix. I'm a suburban guy. I'm not a harsh Republican. And then we see this flood of bills. What has it been like in the legislature to see this kind of change?
Yeah, I think the new motto that we have is it's disappointing but not surprising when all of the progress that we're seeing is they're trying to roll it back. But you're exactly right. What I said on the floor is absolutely true. They're giving speeches on this and let's have, unity and diversity. But the legislation that they are putting forward does anything but, and it actually repeals everything that led to the historic turnout on both sides in the 2021 election. But what we're also seeing is the stone wall that we have, the brick wall in the Senate Democrats that with the slimmest of majorities still do have that majority, and they are killing those bills in the Privileges and Elections Committee. But for that slim majority, we would be Texas and Georgia as well.
Speaking of Stonewall, from the Hill newspaper, we have new information that Virginia lawmakers have struck down same-sex marriage, voting rights proposals, and election is concerns about gerrymandering, concerns about affecting the state population, moving ballot boxes, et cetera, et cetera. What is the status of Virginia in those areas now? Are you concerned? I mean, obviously we're concerned about ballot boxes being moved, but are there any notable debates or fights or legal arguments right now about how the districts in that state have been cut up? And is that a concern heading forward?
Yeah, so we unfortunately passed a constitutional amendment last year. So there was a commission that was called bipartisan, but it was deadlocked. And so the decision of the commission actually ended up going to the Virginia Supreme Court, where special masters drew the maps, and they actually drew the maps toward partisan equity, and instead of reflecting the actual blueness of the state and the trends toward the state. So there's that. And then on the legislative front, there are bills that will pass the House tomorrow that are up for vote tomorrow that roll back a lot of those measures that you saw that made it easier to vote in Virginia. We went from the 38th state to the 12th state because of the things that we were putting in place, and drop boxes are there. So I think it's really important, just as was said, to see not just individual bills, not just to talk about photo ID and whether or not it's easier not to get, but to look at all of this as part of a national strategic playbook that Virginia Republicans are not refusing to be a part of. They're completely bought in on trying this. And so it's really important that when people talk about what's happening across the nation, that they include Virginia in, unfortunately, some of those trends.
And again, it's amazing to see all of this, despite the fact that the Republicans won. They still want to engage in these sorts of behaviors. It may not be the best way, but that's all they know. I want to go to the water, or have you run into the same difficulties that the CDC has run into with Merrick Garland?
Yeah, unfortunately, we are running into those same difficulties. But one thing that we did do, and why elections do matter, in 2021, we passed one of my bills, which was the Voting Rights Act of Virginia. And we did that because we knew we could not trust the federal level, unfortunately, even those that say that they stand for voting rights, because we weren't seeing across the board, across history, we weren't seeing people step up in the ways that we needed to. So there are some protections that we still have in Virginia because of that Voting Rights Act on the the state level. But we echo the calls. We're in session right now, so we can't get to DC, but have been calling and just making sure that people understand that even those states, those like Virginia that were called progressive last year, we're in the same exact place that we need to be beside our brothers and sisters in Texas and Georgia and so many other states. We need help on the federal level, and we need it now. And that's from all three branches of government. And if we can't, shall I say, I know I get in trouble for saying it, but if we can't depend on those that say that they're with us, then don't come asking us for things when it comes to other issues. Everyone is talking about all of these other issues. Voting rights are fundamental and foundational to anything else that we are talking about within our legislatures. We would not be able to fight for minimum wage raises. We're not going to be able to fight for the environment or any of these other issues if we lose the right to vote and access to democracy within our communities that we're fighting for. And so, yes, step up. Please do your job, because all of us are depending upon that.
Elie Bestall, Dr. Christina Greer, and Virginia Delegate Marcia Price.
The delegate from Newport News, Delegate Price.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The delegate has the floor.
Thank you. I am really glad to follow the gentleman from Scott because, Mr. Speaker, words matter. And we have already heard so many words uttered since we began on Wednesday. And I want to run some of those words back so we can all make sure that we are speaking the same language. On Wednesday, we heard from our speaker that you'd be a speaker for all. And on Saturday, the new governor said, no matter who you voted for, I pledge to be your advocate, your voice, your governor. So some of us want to know what those words mean in the face of attempts to undermine our democracy with Republican bills that disproportionately affect communities of color, specifically Black voters, older voters, younger voters, and disabled voters. Are they not deserving of an advocate? Words matter, Mr. Speaker. The governor on Monday also stated, we don't get to pick and choose the parts of the Constitution we want to preserve and protect. And I wholeheartedly agree. But since words matter, Mr. Speaker, I want to clarify, does that mean the amendments too? Because some of the communities we all serve depend on the 15th, 19th, and 26th amendments specifically for their voting rights. Also yesterday, the governor said, but I believe this chamber is big enough for us to talk through our differences. Mr. Speaker, does that mean all bills will be referred, docketed, and have a chance at public debate? Again, Mr. Speaker, I raise these questions because I want to know if the words that are being used have the same conventional meaning so that the people whose voting rights are at stake can manage their expectations for this session for the House of Delegates. As elected members, I understand I have a responsibility with my words. I don't just get to spout the words out that make people feel good and then do the detrimental work to undermine their rights. The gaslighting has got to stop. Too many Americans have their eyes on the United States Senate today as they begin debate on necessary voting rights bills. But Virginians also need to keep their eyes on the House and the Senate of Virginia, Mr. Speaker, as the proposed legislation that is going before both Privileges and Elections Committees this session are a part of a strategic, national, targeted, and comprehensive plan to undermine our democracy. We are seeing bills that will roll back the historic ease of voting that we all experienced in 2021 and the protections that were enacted. The very laws that we enacted led to the historic turnout in November. The bills this year are nothing short of dangerous and show that there is a deep chasm between some of the polished words in speeches we have heard and some of the legislation. But words matter, Mr. Speaker. Dishonesty and misinformation continue to weaken and threaten our political system. We are hearing rumors of voter fraud, but I do not hear those same people questioning the results of the election that brought us a new administration and new House members. So, either there was rampant voter fraud and we need to investigate the outcome of the 2020 election or not. Seeing as we aren't questioning the outcome, it seems we can all agree that voter fraud did not happen. On more than one occasion, I have had the privilege of having my bills killed, and the phrase that was used was, "It's a solution in search of a problem," implying that there is no real problem to be addressed, and that the solution being sought was premature or unnecessary. Well, Mr. Speaker, words matter. It would seem that in the absence of evidence of voter fraud, that clamping down on people's access to the ballot is indeed a really messed up solution in search of a problem that does not exist. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to watching the actions of the governor and all of my colleagues to see what we mean by the words we use. Because if we really want to be judged by the content of our character, then please know our actions speak louder than our words. Thank you.